The year is 1999, and at the young age of 4, my dad bought me my first gaming console, the Sony PlayStation.
You winning?
I don't remember exactly what all came with it, but what I do remember is the first video game I ever played, and it was Jet Moto 2. From that moment on, I was hooked on video games. The world of Jet Moto 2 was so creative and full of mystery. My parents struggled to pull me away from the TV. Most of the time, I wasn't even racing, just looking at the scenery and trying to find every little detail and secret in the level. It's hard to describe just how much this franchise means to me, but without this game, my love for video games might not be as large as it is today. Obviously, this series doesn't start with Jet Moto 2, so let's go back to the beginning with the development of Jet Moto 1.
So anyway, I'm playing Jet Moto, right? And I'm riding on this jet motorcycle, and I'm hurtling through different terrains: snow, concrete, ocean, jungle. I mean, when you got that kind of power between your legs, you don't know what to expect. Anything could happen.
Now, before diving in, let's talk a little about Single Track, the development company for Jet Moto. Many of the early developers came from a company called Evans and Sutherland. The important thing here to note is they are a computer graphics firm, not a game company, and even had a hand in helping design Namco's System 32 arcade board that powered Ridge Racer with texture mapping technology, but they never actually designed any games. Former Single Track employee Jay Branson was quoted in saying, "Amusingly, when I was hired at Single Track, I was probably more knowledgeable about the games biz and making games than most of the other people there. Most of the employees had been from a major simulation company and had decided to form a game company in the belief that they could make games." Now, luckily for Single Track, even with the lack of experience, the team made 2 smash hit games with Warhawk and then Twisted Metal for the PS1. Impressed, Sony signed a contract with them to make 2 more exclusive games, which leads us to the release of Jet Moto. The game was conceived as a science fiction motocross. The team really wanted a large amount of racers on the track, so the idea to create Jet Motos and not use real motorcycles was because of the polygon limitations of the original PlayStation. It just wasn't possible to render that many wheels on the screen. The game also has a unique physics-based system for racing, but only the player uses these physics rules, as it would be too demanding for every racer to use them. So, what is the gameplay actually like? To start, we get 20 different racers to choose from, all with unique stats. Each racer is a part of a sponsor team, such as Butterfinger or Mountain Dew. Having real companies associated with the racers in this game is so cool to see. It really helps make the game feel closer to real life, and, I mean, what's more synonymous with gaming than Mountain Dew? The racing is mostly physics-based. When hitting bumps in the track or taking jumps, the motion and reaction of the riders feels really realistic and floaty, like you would expect from a hovering bike. The game has some really sharp corners, and the steering is unfortunately not super tight. The game tries to compensate for this by placing electromagnetic posts that you can link onto for those tight turns, but you have a meter that loses charge as you do this, so you better get around quickly, otherwise you're going to be losing charge and quickly careening into the wall. You also get 3 speed boosts per lap. This, for me, is the most fun part of the game. It's like when you're doing time trials in Mario Kart and you strategically try to find the best spots to use the boost to get the most effectiveness out of it. Using all your boosts perfectly in a lap can feel extremely satisfying. For the most part, these systems work well, but occasionally the physics get a little jank, and you will land in just the right spot where your rider is stuck riding at an angle. The only way to get out of this that I found is to either go off a jump where you can try to reorient yourself, which is easier said than done, or to just crash. The actual mechanics for crashing are also a little strange. Sometimes I will hit a sunken log and just kind of bounce over it. Other times I hit it just right and my character completely wipes out. It's really hard to ride the line between crashing and staying on course. This is also compounded by the other 19 racers on the track, and I frequently find myself bumping into other racers and crashing or flying off course. It also takes a pretty big hit to the game's performance, and honestly, the tracks have a hard time fitting in this many racers. I would have preferred far less, but it does add to the chaotic nature of the game. But what is a racing game without its tracks? And for the most part, the tracks here are pretty good. The tracks that really chap my ass though are the ones designed in a figure eight. With 20 racers on the same track and the game not having the tightest controls, the two-way passing of motos is way too ridiculous. It is near impossible to not crash multiple times. Between the normal map hazards, opponents you are trying to pass, and racers coming at you from the opposite direction, you can't possibly dodge everything. The developers definitely knew what they were doing naming some of these tracks like Suicide Swamp, because you will die a lot. And losing on tracks like these can feel extremely unfair, as the chaotic nature makes it hard to consistently get first place without some luck involved. To make this next segment quick, I think I will name off my top 3 favorite and least favorite tracks, starting with my least favorites. At number 3, we have the aforementioned Suicide Swamp. Way too many obstacles, and I already hate the figure 8 design. I almost put Hammerhead here instead, but I found a way to just cheese that track by staying under the bridge in the water, making it far less egregious. Number 2 comes Cliff Diver, and this course has the worst turns. There are only a few racers that have good enough handling to actually properly maneuver around these corners. Everyone else is just pretty much screwed unless I come to a complete stop. It virtually has no straights either for the faster racers to catch up later. I take an L on this track virtually every time. This thing belongs in the bin.
Yeah, but you're in the bin.
Number 3, my least favorite, is Cypress Run. This track is a real piece of work. Overall, I would say this game has aged okay, except for this level in particular. It is just riddled with trees and stumps. It is so hard to dodge because the render distance is god awful, so the textures are blurry, and then they pop in right before you even get a chance to dodge. Not to mention, it also has a section filled with hairpin turns that are nigh impossible even with the best handling characters. I crash such an unbelievable amount of times on this track. It is seriously so awful. I have absolutely no praise to give this particular track. But I wanted to end this off on a positive note, so let's go over the favorite tracks. My third favorite level is Joyride. I know it sounds kind of weird. It's a pretty boring level and is clearly made for first-time players, but I think it is a genuinely well-designed track. It does a great job teaching the player the basic physics and mechanics of how the game works. You know, not much else to say about it. It is just a really solid introduction to the game. Second favorite track is probably Ice Crusher, weirdly enough. Not sure what it is about this track, but it just kind of clicked with me. It's really challenging, but has just the right amount of trial and error that I ended up feeling really satisfied once I got good at it. I'm sure this track isn't for everyone, but personally, perfecting this track was really engaging for me. Alright, and last but not least, my favorite track in the game, Nightmare. First of all, what a badass name for a track. Secondly, it is supposedly the hardest track in the game, even though I find some of my least favorite tracks to be quite a bit more difficult. This track falls into a similar category as Ice Crusher. It's a little frustrating learning the track the first go around, but as you get used to the handling, your jet, and the half-pipe turns of the track, it is so much fun to nail. This is also one of the few tracks that I genuinely felt like I was hauling ass, and it doesn't really punish you for it either. Many other tracks in the game end up punishing you in some way for going fast, whether it's flying off course or, more often than not, smoking your head on the roof of something. Looking at you, Willpower. But Nightmare, for the most part, avoids this as long as you aren't pedal to the floor for the entire track and know when to start slowing down. Outside of the racers and tracks, the game doesn't offer a whole lot. You have a couple of different race modes like Elimination and Rally, along with the typical championship circuit, but it still just boils down to get first and you'll win. There at least is a little bit of variety, but as it stands, this game feels like a decent rental pickup back in the day where you could grind out all the tracks on a weekend and feel pretty fulfilled about it. There is one last thing I would like to mention before we move on to our next game, and I wasn't really sure where to fit this in, but Blackwater Falls has a really cool shortcut in it, but I'm pretty sure it is the only track in the game to feature something like this. I genuinely feel like adding in some more shortcuts to some of these other levels would have added some replayability and encouraged a little exploration of the tracks. Overall, it's a solid game, and I did enjoy my time with it.
Come on, hit the gas! You're killing me out here!
Jet Moto 2. More tracks, more control, more speed. Take advantage of it.
And turn off the blinker!
PlayStation.
Alright, here we go. Now we got the heavy hitter, Jet Moto 2. And this is the game I actually got to grow up on. I have so many good memories with this game, even though I was really terrible at it. Let's see if some of that nostalgia actually ends up holding up. Right off the bat, we see some pretty major improvements. Graphically, the game looks a lot better. This is most likely due to the reduction in players on the track from 20 to 10, a change I was calling for from the previous game. Not only does this help graphically, but in my opinion, these tracks were never built around having such a high count of racers. Having less makes figure 8 style tracks so much more bearable. They also changed the way the boosting works. In the first game you got 4 small boosts every lap, but now you get a boost meter that refills every lap. What this means is you can either hold it down for a long boost or try saving it by doing a bunch of tiny little boost taps. I personally feel like this change mechanic adds a lot of depth to approaching tracks. Is it better to use my boost when turning out of corners, or should I save it for the big straight at the end of the track? Both are pretty viable options, giving the individual player a lot of agency. Also, the physics in this game are just a lot better. It's hard to describe, and I'm sure the footage doesn't do it justice, but turning and jumping just feels a lot better here, and like I have more control over the jet. But for some of the downsides, we did lose a pretty large cast of the racers and our Butterfinger sponsorship. But on the bright side, we did gain some new ones like the actual jet ski brand, and honestly, the Mountain Dew brand is what really matters here. Like, come on. Interestingly enough, the racers also only have 3 stats to show now: weight, top speed, and acceleration, removing both lift and handling from the previous game. I'm not really sure why this decision was made, but maybe it was a way of simplifying the selection process for a first-time player. But for me, I personally would appreciate some more in-depth statistics. To me, the music here is also greatly improved. Honestly, some of these songs are just straight up really good and set a great tone for the high-speed action on the track. The songs have such a futuristic but grungy feel to it all, and it just really stands out to me, where the previous game, the music wasn't offensive, but it definitely wasn't really memorable for me either. Another really cool thing that Jet Moto 2 added was a trophy case feature, so the player actually has some goals to accomplish, where in the previous game you just tried to unlock all the tracks and then you were done. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but all these little things really boost the presentation over the first entry. But what is really important here is the track design, and I will say, once again, in my opinion, that it is also greatly improved. We have a much larger variety of different settings as well compared to the first game, where that one was set up in just a few different biomes. Jet Moto 2 has some really unique set pieces, one of my favorite examples being Aftershock. You have this run-down, flooded cityscape with sunken crash planes and broken buildings everywhere. When you do eventually get out of the water, the city streets are torn up from years of weather and wear. It really creates this eerie feeling and makes you wonder what happened here, where this once large city has now been turned into a racetrack. For another great example, we have a track like Hot Shot, where it looks like we are racing in Yellowstone National Park with bison everywhere and a huge geyser at the center of one of the turns. It is just so cool to look at. The shaft is like this abandoned mining track, and in one of the big turns on this level, there's a cave, and if you go near it, you start to hear this growling and see yellow eyes inside. It's super spooky, especially when I was a little kid. To avoid detailing every single track, I'll list my top 3 least favorite and favorite tracks once again. My least favorite track in the game is probably the shaft. This track is the worst figure 8 course by a pretty large margin, and trying to navigate the platforms when you're in first place and other races are coming at you from the opposite direction is just insane. The tight turns right at the beginning of the track as you're coming out of the loop are also pretty insufferable. While the cool theme here is a pretty nice touch, it can't really save this frustrating track. Number 2 is Kamate. It has this really ridiculous turn into a slim bridge that gets me to fall off almost every single time. And we also get one of those classic crappy swamp sections with way too many obstacles in your way, and the direction of the track becomes really unclear. The level design just feels really uninspired, with no memorable landmarks or anything that makes it stand out from any of the other much better tracks. Honestly, I usually forget this track exists until I'm forced to race on it again, and then I'm just reminded how much I dislike it. Between the unfair turns, the excessive obstacles, and the bland look, it's just really an unenjoyable track to race on. Okay, so coming in at number 3 on my list of least favorite tracks is Macchu. I generally just don't really like snow levels to begin with. They often feel a bit boring and don't have much going on. There are a few parts of this track that are super annoying. That first jump into the tunnel, forget about it. I probably only make it about 10% of the time, and it usually just sets a bad vibe for the whole race. Right after that, there's this huge gorge, and if you're not ready for it, it's pretty much game over. And then there's this tricky jump in a small cave that's nearly impossible to clear unless you have perfect speed or a perfectly timed boost. And if you're out of boost, then you're probably not going to make it either. While I wouldn't say Macchu is the absolute worst track ever, its design flaws just make it really hard to win consistently. Macchu, like I said, does have some pretty cool ideas, but the execution just isn't there. Maybe if it had a different theme, and maybe if the obstacles were designed a little better, or maybe a little less punishing, it could actually have ended up being a pretty decent track. But let's move on to something good, my top 3 favorite tracks. Starting with 3, it is Aftershock. As I mentioned before, the theme here is really amazing, and it is just one of those beginner courses that really does a great job helping the player learn the controls of the game. Moving on to number 2, we have the hardest track in the game, the double black diamond course, Nebulous. And the theme for this course is just incredible. You have a heaven and hell dynamic where you teleport between the two courses. The heaven sections are usually a little more floaty and jumpy, where down in hell it's all about speed and deadly platforms. It is a course that really tests all of your skills, and it's shockingly fun to go through this course with how ridiculously difficult it is, but I just think the concept is so cool, and honestly the course is really fun. But it can't compare to my number 1 favorite, and that is Rollercide. This course is the most fun I had playing both of these games. First off, the theme is awesome. I mean, you race on a roller coaster track while popping in and out of circus tents. It's such a cool theme. It is a figure 8 course, which maybe would have docked at points, but compared to the other figure 8 designs, this track is wide enough where I had no issues getting around the other racers. The real goal of this course is to use the grapple to pull yourself down onto the track so you don't fly off on the ramps. Rollercide is easily the course you can gain the most speed on, and let me tell you, when you nail a sequence of grapples and boosts without crashing, you feel incredible. It's a course that is pretty easy to race on, but really hard to master, and it makes me love always coming back to it. And hey, if you weren't a super big fan of Jet Moto 2's track design, then I've got good news for you. Every single one of the original Jet Moto's tracks are unlockable with a cheat code. And I'm happy to say that the better controls and fewer racers really make those older courses a blast to play. While I still lean towards the track list in Jet Moto 2, having all the courses from the first game kind of makes Jet Moto 2 the definitive Jet Moto experience for me up to this point. Now, you might think we're finished discussing Jet Moto 2, But there's also the greatest hits version to look at. For those familiar with PlayStation 1's greatest hits label, Sony typically enforced a strict rule. No changes were permitted between the original Black Label and greatest hits releases. The game had to be identical, simply shipped in larger quantities at a lower price. So then, what's the story here? When Sony approached the Jet Moto team to create the greatest hits edition of the game, SingleTrack wanted to make a championship edition for the greatest hits release. This would feature a new cover along with many game tweaks and changes. SingleTrack sent in the disc with changes along with their proposal, but Sony shut it down and wanted to keep the game exactly the same as it was, just like every other greatest hits release. SingleTrack reluctantly complied, submitting the original master copy for distribution. However, during the production process, the Championship Edition was inadvertently substituted for the original master. Sony was furious upon discovery, accusing SingleTrack, who in turn argued that the error was not theirs, having sent the correct disc, and suggested the fault lay with someone at Sony. Either way, the Championship Edition was already created en masse and shipped out for sale, so the rest is history. So what are all the differences between the two releases? Jet Moto Championship Edition features only 4 drivers on the course, which significantly boosts performance, maintaining a consistent 30 frames per second. However, the racers are 50% faster, a design choice that unfortunately makes the courses feel ill-suited for the increased speed. Navigating turns becomes extremely challenging, and jumps propel the racer way too far, making it nearly impossible to control without constantly reducing the throttle. The experience feels more like a struggle against the controls than a competition against other racers. On the positive side, all courses from the original Jet Moto 1 are unlocked from the start, no cheat codes required. The home screen art is also distinct, labeling the game as Championship Edition. Despite these differences, the original version is likely the superior way to experience the game, although finding a Black Label copy can be pretty difficult. Fortunately, the PlayStation Store offers the original version, not the Championship Edition.
We want to find out why this hover bike is here. And
I don't have no idea
like
why it's there. Like I said, I went in and wanted to look at it to see if there was any foul play involved.
Let me finish my question, and then you can answer, okay? Stay with her. 22, I'm in pursuit.
It's Jet Moto 3, the pure adrenaline and insane speed you've always wanted without all the tickets. The rush is back.
Freeze right there!
Finally, we are on our last game to ever release for the Jet Moto franchise, and that is Jet Moto 3. This time, SingleTrack was not at all involved in the development of this game, and the rights were handed over to 989 Studios, who were known for games like Siphon Filter and a ton of sports games. Right when the game boots up, there is a very distinct difference between the art direction of the previous games and this one. Gone are the hand-drawn portraits and rocking tunes. Now we are met with a pretty flat title screen that scrolls through really dated and crummy looking 3D models. It is incredible how much the real hand-drawn artwork of the original games added to the overall feel and presentation of the game comparatively to Jet Moto 3, where the generic 3D models look a little soulless. The lead developer for Jet Moto 3 was quoted saying, "Jet Moto 3 was my first and last PlayStation 1 project. In fact, I had not even completed any game engines before Jet Moto 3. I worked on one at Atari Games, but they canceled my project, which caused me to become disgruntled." I bring up this quote because his inexperience in programming really shows in this game. The physics and overall feel of the game just seems very off from the previous titles. Although his efforts are commendable as he had to start all of his code for Jet Moto 3 from scratch, it still doesn't change the fact that it just really doesn't feel as crisp or good as the original games. The Jet Motos end up feeling slippery as you sort of just slide all over the place like a bar of soap. On the positive side of things for this game, we finally get the perfect dynamic duo of Mountain Dew and Doritos. It took 3 games, but finally the meme gods have graced us with the perfection of the Mountain Dew and Doritos sponsored racers. It is a little poetic in a way, being the last game. We also get some other cool sponsors like Slim Jim.
Oh, yeah!
In terms of game features and race modes, there really isn't anything new here that wasn't already in Jet Moto 2, so let's just jump right into the race courses. Jet Moto 3's track design is not very good. While a few courses hit the mark, a huge chunk of them are severely flawed, making you wonder if they even playtested the game properly. We're going to dive into both good and, more extensively, the bad Jet Moto 3 tracks. Among the game's offerings, here are a select few tracks that I actually thought managed to be pretty enjoyable and well designed. Devil's Canyon. This opening course is a shining example of how to do a tutorial the right way. Its smooth layout and intuitive flow perfectly ease you into Jet Moto 3's core mechanics. It's a really solid start, letting newcomers get a feel for the controls and the game without getting totally frustrated. The simplicity yet effectiveness of Devil's Canyon really highlights what a missed opportunity the rest of the game's courses really are. Next up is Volcano Island. And even though you might get a little lost sometimes, Volcano Island makes up for it with its awesome visuals. The vibrant look and consistent theme really make for an engaging experience. Racing through rivers of molten lava is super cool and just looks awesome. So even though this course has a couple minor hiccups in terms of the design, the artistic vision kinda saved it here. And lastly, we have Lost City. Hands down, this is probably the best track in Jet Moto 3. It perfectly captures the vibe of the older Jet Moto games. This track has an ancient Roman theme with crumbling ruins and really cool architecture. The track has a really well put together layout, and combined with its captivating setting, it makes a truly memorable and fun to play experience. Up to these initial better designed courses in Jet Moto 3, it actually manages to be somewhat entertaining, showing a small glimpse of the potential that this game had, but it sadly largely goes unfulfilled. The player experience takes a serious nosedive once you hit the higher difficulty courses. Even the best courses in Jet Moto 3 barely stack up to an average track in the previous Jet Moto games. This sharp decline points to a fundamental problem with the design philosophy for the more challenging levels. And let's start with Sequoia Forest. This track embodies the chaotic and hazard-filled design even beyond what Suicide Swamp did in Jet Moto 1. It feels like a poorly thought out attempt at high-speed navigation, but there is no clear path, and it makes it impossible to figure out where you're supposed to go. While I complained about texture pop-in in the original Jet Moto games, Jet Moto 3 takes a far worse approach by using fog distance to hide the rendering. This is a huge step backward, sacrificing clarity and visual info for a technique that's just clearly worse than what they were doing before. This track really wouldn't be as disorienting as it is if they just used the previous game's methods of using low poly models in the distance and then having to pop in again. Adding on to the bad track design, while riding on tree trunks after the main forest section sounds really cool in theory, it's executed extremely poorly and it's really difficult. At one point, you're sort of supposed to try and Tarzan yourself with a grappling hook, which sounds really sick, but it hardly functions properly unless you hit it perfectly. I will say, I do still kind of like the theme here, and what they're trying to do, I sort of get it. It just really didn't work out. And for all of its flaws, this track isn't even close to the worst offender in Jet Moto 3's bad track lineup. Catacombs is another track plagued by insane level of difficulty. The design here forces players to hug the edges of these massive gaping pits, which is almost impossible given the game's physics and controls. These pits lead to constant momentum killing falls, turning, what should be some exciting jumps into a tiresome exercise in trial and error. The respawn points are set up almost right outside of where you fell, making it so that you don't have enough speed to clear the gap anymore, forcing you to turn around to an easier point and build up speed to try and clear the gap. It feels like the only way to really compete on this map is to just have a perfect run where you never fall in any of the pits, because if you fall even just once and you need to actually turn around to build up speed, all the other CPU racers are going to be passing you, and you might as well just restart the whole track. But despite this terrible design, this track isn't even close to my least favorite in the entire game. The absolute lowest point of track design in this entire trilogy, the track that truly exemplifies the game's most severe flaws, is undeniably Macchu Picchu. The render distance issues, which were already annoying in the other tracks, become completely unmanageable here. This track isn't just difficult, it's packed with what I can only describe as dick moves. They are intentional design choices that actively screw over the player, and it just creates this unavoidable frustration. One of the best examples I can show you is a climb that you have up a towering structure, and if you don't slow down enough for a sharp turn at the very top, you're launched off the top of the tower, and you plummet right back down to the track. They don't kill you, so instead of a convenient respawn point that lets you get back onto the track quickly, you're brutally forced to reclimb the entire tower from its base. This single mistake, which I assume for most first-time racers is going to be a common occurrence, will inevitably end up costing you the entire race. Another extremely infuriating section involves crossing a huge pit using a combo of a boost and the grappling hook. If you don't boost at the perfect time, or have enough momentum leading into the jump, there is no way you're going to be clearing this chasm. Trying to clear this single jump took me about 20 attempts to get past, which just shows how brutally designed it is. Just like previous tracks we've talked about, the respawn point after field attempt is really inconveniently placed, making it impossible to build up enough speed for the jump without first turning around and building up a significant amount of momentum, which is super time consuming and tedious. These are just the worst two offending sections of Macchu Picchu. After them, the rest of the track is just as ridiculously difficult, and honestly I didn't get any enjoyment out of racing on this track. It is just a track built to punish you constantly, and I think I could go my whole life without ever having to race on it again. To make things even worse, Jet Moto 3 uses the tired and totally uninspired game design trope of offering 3 tracks in reverse, doing the clever thing where the name of the track is also backwards, like Macchu Picchu being Ukip Ukam. And as you can tell on the cruel twist of fate, like I just said, Macchu Picchu was one of the courses selected to get this reversal. I am not sure why the developers thought they did such a good job on this track where they needed to offer it to us twice, but I hate it. Trying to navigate the reverse version of this already nightmarish course is just genuinely unbearable. During the recording of this, I had just endured the standard version of this track for 10 minutes, and my mental fortitude was just completely shot. When I was trying to get footage for the reverse version of this, I immediately right out of the gate started struggling, and every movement felt like just a Herculean effort. It was a constant battle against the track's just terrible flaws. And after just one lap, I decided I was just going to quit out of the game. I couldn't do it anymore. It was just one of those things where I at least had the entire track recorded in reverse at that point, and there was no way that completing all 3 laps was just going to suddenly make this track enjoyable. With that said, let's move on to the last track of the game, Planet X. While the title itself makes it seem like this track's going to be this epic looking alien landscape with a really thrilling fast-paced race, the track itself actually turned out to be a pretty big disappointment. It pretty much embodies many of the recurring problems seen in all the other tracks. It, of course, has a short render distance that hides the path ahead, and the poor visibility leads to really unexpected obstacles and frequent falls. And with the inconvenient spawn points that we saw in the previous tracks, they don't get any better here, and it completely kills your momentum, and you have to once again back up and try to build momentum to get past the challenging jumps. Despite its visually appealing design and intriguing concepts like navigating alien structures and the really bizarre terrain, its execution, just like the rest of the game, is really just fundamentally flawed. While not as ridiculously designed as the unholy Macchu Picchu, this relative lesser evil doesn't in any way make it better or really enjoyable. It kind of remains a missed opportunity. It's a visually promising concept ruined by the technical design flaws from all the previous tracks. To wrap up my thoughts on this game, it just feels really uninspired compared to the previous two games that we just played. It kind of lost all the things that made it feel unique and fresh. The tracks try to capture what the originals had, and I like most of the concepts, but the execution is just terrible. The first two games were very hard, and the tracks were unforgiving, don't get me wrong, but this game is on a whole different level. With Jet Moto 1 and 2, I would do bad on a course, but with some practice, I could really start to get the hang of things. Jet Moto 3 just does not feel the same. The track design is really chaotic and nonsensical, and the fog distance really hinders you even further. It's almost like they thought we need to make difficult tracks like the previous games and just made them impossible without any real playtesting. I mean, overall this game is just not good, and I came into it with really fresh eyes wanting to enjoy it. You'd think the story of Jet Moto would end with the poor sales of Jet Moto 3 and the series kind of fading into obscurity. But hidden in the sea of unreleased games is one final fascinating chapter. Jet Moto 2124, the fourth and ultimately lost entry in the series. This wasn't just intended to be another iteration in the Jet Moto franchise. Jet Moto 2124 was conceived with an ambitious narrative, placing it far into a bleak future. It was a world ravaged by a third global conflict, yet from the ashes a new order emerged, and with it a revitalized, highly advanced form of the Jet Moto races. The developers envisioned this post-World War III setting and these radically improved bikes as a backbone for some newer, never-before-seen track design in the series. Riders could defy gravity, navigating courses that twisted upside down and sideways, pushing the boundaries of what racing games were up to this point. Unfortunately, that grand vision for Jet Moto 2124 never truly materialized. The game's development was, from its inception, fraught with significant challenges and internal struggles. While the concept for Jet Moto 2124 was undeniably ambitious, its journey through development at 989 Studios was far from smooth. It wasn't just the shadow of Jet Moto 3's underperformance that loomed. The team faced a cascade of internal and external hurdles that ultimately sealed its fate. Firstly, there were significant technical challenges. Developers reportedly struggled with fundamental aspects like the game's camera, which was crucial for navigating the wild, gravity-defying tracks that they had envisioned. A flawed physics model for the Jet Motos themselves was another significant concern, making it difficult to achieve the precise, high-speed control the team was aiming for. It was especially challenging for them, given that they had the ambition to blend the Jet Moto feel with wipeout speed. Outside of the coding, the project did face considerable internal friction. Some stories from ex-developers suggest that a new company president at 989 Studios showed little support for the fourth Jet Moto entry, questioning whether it was really necessary. On top of this, the studio director reportedly pushed for the widening of all the tracks, and it was a decision that significantly bloated development time as the PlayStation 1's hardware struggled to render the larger environments. This kind of shifting vision and apparent lack of unified direction was absolutely crippling for the development of Jet Moto 2124 during its production. After 2 years in development, just as it was nearing the beta testing phase and it was reportedly around 40% complete, the plug was officially pulled. It was a disheartening end for a game that promised to take the series to truly fantastic heights. Now, luckily, a playable prototype build for the game surfaced on the Jet Moto Central forums back in 2014. The forum is still up and running and contains all the never-before-seen content from the game. The game offers a decently sized roster of characters to choose from, although some of them don't work. And the game's track list is also quite large, although most are buggy and incomplete with random checkpoints and no enemy racers. Mechanically, the game actually feels really good though. I can confidently say that if this game ever came to completion, it might have been one of my favorite Jet Moto games just on driving feel alone. The new motos are probably the coolest looking design yet. I love the additional fins and how they rotate and react to your steering. It is really realistic. And just like the previous games, we can go over some of my favorite tracks here, but let's just take things with a grain of salt considering most of them are completely unfinished. The first playable track, Atlantis, isn't very difficult, but I actually really love the setting and environment. This track really helped me get a good feel for the controls, and it was just a lot of fun zipping around. As I mentioned earlier, the physics really shine here. This is probably the best feeling Jet Moto game by far. This game offers a really good amount of control and handling while still keeping things really fast. I also really liked Mars. It's probably the second most complete track available. The environment looks pretty great, and being able to race out in the red deserts of Mars to then come back inside to a cool looking futuristic tech track is just a lot of fun. Phobos is probably the last memorable track. It is pretty punishing and most of the respawn points are broken, so if you fall off you lose a lot of progress, but it's still just really cool and fun jumping between platforms. It even has a section where you swing across a gap using the grapple, but it actually functions really well and looks awesome, unlike in Jet Moto 3. I unfortunately really don't have much else to say about Jet Moto 2124. It's a game that, as I played it, made me really sad it never got finished and released, because I really think this would have been the best Jet Moto game to date. The bones of this game are really great, and for anyone interested, I would highly urge you to go to Jet Moto Central and grab the ROM to emulate it for yourself. It's a really interesting look back into how game development was back then. So, here we are, at the end of the line for the Jet Moto franchise. Looking back, it's clear this series holds a special place in my heart, primarily due to Jet Moto 2 being one of my foundational gaming experiences. It was a chaotic, exhilarating, and sometimes frustrating ride, but one that left a lasting impression and solidified my love for video games. It's a shame that a franchise with such a unique identity and flashes of brilliance has largely faded from memory. While the original games had their quirks and Jet Moto 3 stumbled significantly, the core concept of hovering bikes racing across crazy terrains was always compelling. The unreleased Jet Moto 2124 even hinted at a truly revolutionary feature that sadly never really came to be. For me, Jet Moto isn't just a collection of games. It's a testament to the creativity and experimental spirit of the early PlayStation era. It's a reminder of a time when developers pushed boundaries with limited hardware, often creating games that, while imperfect, had immense character and left an incredible mark on players like me. While it may be a forgotten relic to many, the Jet Moto series will always be cherished as a part of gaming history. Hey everyone, just wanted to take some time in the post-credits here to thank you all for watching, especially if you made it to the end here. I just really appreciate it. This is a project that took me a really long time to put together. I sat on the script for months before I finally decided to just sit down and actually work on it, and all the production I put into it took me a really long time to put together. As you can imagine, working a full-time job and then trying to make a big documentary about one of your favorite gaming franchises can be really daunting, especially when you don't know how it's turning out. So I really hope you guys enjoyed watching the video today and maybe learned something new. I tried to do as much research as I could, and I'm sure that there's certain things I either didn't get right or some things that I missed out on that I could have put in there that would have been interesting, but I really tried to be as researched as possible making this video. But with all that being said, like I mentioned, I just want to thank you guys one more time. This has been a lot of fun to put together, and it was really awesome getting to go back and playing one of my favorite and most memorable childhood games. Was super awesome. Who knows, maybe sometime in the future they'll revive this franchise and maybe make a small little game. I don't know, maybe there's not enough meat on the bone for that, but one can kind of dream, right? Maybe they'll finish Jet Moto 2124 and release it as a cool, I don't know, retro game on the store for cheap or something like that. Doesn't need to be high production, but it'd be cool to see this franchise come back. yeah, anyways, thank you guys one last time, and I hope you enjoyed the video.